Those were the Anchorage Daily News.
The Anchorage Daily News. Good. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Bailey, Petroleum News.
Petroleum News. What are you interested in?
Everything.
Alaska Public Radio.
Public radio. I got it. Yeah, we can see the press here. You okay?
Great friend with CBS 11 News.
Yes, 11.
Just like
Alaska Dispatch. Yeah.
Superintendent of Thermal Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce? Journal of Commerce. All right. I was back here hiding.
ABC 13.
ABC 13.
Full banner of Speaker's Office.
Speaker's Office.
Yes, sir.
The Speaker
Of the State House.
of the State House. All right. Good to see you. And all the camera guys.
How you doing?
How are you? How are you?
Secretary Roxanne
Examiner.com. Okay. David Hayes, you want to come join me?
Sure.
Let me thank you all for coming out here as I finish my whirlwind trip through Alaska. We have been here for essentially has been 48 hours. In that 48-hour time period, we've been to the north, to Bristol Bay. We saw the development efforts underway in Bristol Bay. We've been over the Beaufort Sea. We went into the National Petroleum Reserve, had meetings with ConocoPhillips on CD5 and the proposed oil and gas development up in that area. We also spent time in Barrow yesterday and did an overflight of the Chukchi Sea. And we have met with Alaska Natives, including the Alaska Federation of Natives this morning. So there's been a lot that we've done in the 48-hour time period that we have spent here. Let me just make a couple of comments about the mission for this trip. I came to Alaska because as Secretary of Interior, we have a huge interest and huge decisions that loom on the horizon for us to make. We are responsible for many of our national parks and wildlife refuges and BLM lands and BIA issues and USGS issues and have a huge presence here in Alaska. And we very much look at our relationship with the people of Alaska as a positive one. As we look at this state as the great frontier which it is and the great natural resources that we have here. As Secretary of Interior, my role is to be the custodian of America's natural resources and America's natural heritage. And we see that heritage fully on display here in Alaska. It was important for me to come here because there are decisions that we will be making in the future, especially in connection with oil and gas and the development of energy needs for the nation. And before I made those decisions, I wanted to make sure that I was seeing firsthand what the conditions are in the Beaufort and the Chukchi and what the issues are that we're dealing with on the NPRA as well as in the coastal plains of ANWR. And so with us now having looked at these issues, we go back to Washington, and in the months ahead we'll be making some critical decisions that obviously will have an impact on the people of Alaska and on the energy needs of our nation. David Hayes is the Deputy Secretary of Interior. He works with me on all of these issues, and so he has accompanied me on the trip and put together the program over the last several days. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Does the moratorium on Gulf drilling apply to Alaska? Last week we heard Director Brownridge say it does not, but in hearings back in the spring you said it does. What is the case?
Yeah, the moratorium does in fact apply to Alaska because we are not going to allow the drilling activities that would have to happen in the OCS without us having to make some kind of affirmative decision. Let me just be very specific. If the drilling activity in the Outer Continental Shelf now is essentially the exploration wells, which Shell had proposed to drill in the Chukchi and the Beaufort. I put those exploration plans on hold this year until we learn more from the experience that we've had dealing with Macondo well in the Gulf of Mexico. So in effect, until we are confident that drilling can be conducted in the Chukchi and the Beaufort Sea, we will not be allowing that program to move forward.
I have a question about subsistence, if that's okay.
Sure.
Do you think more money is needed for the subsistence program? It sounds like these regional advisory councils have a problem just traveling around and meeting because there's not enough money, and also scientific research is an issue. So do you think more money is needed for the program, and will that be possible?
We're looking at the subsistence program and have put forward a number of different changes that we want to make in the subsistence program. We have a new chair of the subsistence program, Tim Tuareg, who I just designated to be a part of that. We're adding rural residents to the board to make sure that we have a subsistence program that works better. And we heard this morning from AFN as well as yesterday up in Barrow from Alaska Natives with respect to some of their concerns on the subsistence program. We have a unique responsibility in Interior because of our trust relationship to make sure that the subsistence rights of Alaska Natives are being honored. And we will continue to work with them to see in what ways the program can be made more effective for their equals. And so that was part of the conversation we had this morning.
Can you list a couple of specific items that they mentioned?
The view is that there has to be a much more robust effort on the part of Interior to make sure that the subsistence rights are being upheld for Alaska Natives. And they have a number of specific issues which my director here in Alaska, Pat Pershaw, has been working with Alaska Natives and other stakeholders very closely for the last year, and we'll continue to work on those issues.
Okay.
Yes?
I have a couple of questions. The drilling in Chukchi and Beaufort and getting confident, do you have any sense of any kind of timeline for when you might be making any kind of decisions there? It's my understanding that it's not something that will be resolved by the end of the moratorium. Obviously, that something additional could happen to that moratorium. But do you have any sort of timeline at all for making a decision?
There's a practical decision that is driven by the weather conditions in the Arctic, and that is that if the exploration wells which Shell proposes to drill are to be drilled in the next summer, those decisions will have to be made close to the end of this year or the early part of next year. And that's because Shell will not be able to put together the effort to go in during the open window to do those exploration wells. And so we will be making those decisions in the several months ahead. Let me say for the people of Alaska, I think what is most important is for them to recognize the three central questions, which I have asked Director Bromwich to deliver a report to me and the Deputy Secretary here by the end of November, and maybe that the report gets delivered to us by the end of September. But the Deepwater Horizon rollout really has put on the forefront three very central questions that we as a nation need to consider, and those central questions are very applicable to the Arctic areas where there is interest in oil and gas exploration. Those questions are first, drilling safety and workplace safety. What kinds of requirements should there be for blowout preventers, for cementing, for casing, and all of the rest of the issues which Director Bromwich is addressing through hearings, including one that he had here in Anchorage, I think last week or the week before, and the ongoing regulatory changes that we're making within the Department of Interior through our notice to lessees on safety and additional rules, which we will be promulgating some of them by the end of this month. So there's a bucket of issues around drilling, safety, and worker safety, which we're looking at. There's a second bucket of issues relating to oil spill containment. You have watched, as I have watched and have been involved in every day since April 20th, trying to figure out how you can contain a blowout that happens in the ocean. And notwithstanding the fact that we were working with a company which is the third largest company in the world, you've seen the frustrations that they have faced, from the failed containment dome to the failed top kill, to the failed junk kill, to the many sagas that we have been through, to finally get now that we're getting to the end of the road. It is our hope that in the days ahead we will see the ultimate end of the saga of the Macondo well with the final kill. But it clearly demonstrates that there needs to be additional effort that to address the issue of containment when you have the kind of blowout that we've had at the Macondo well. That same issue very much applies to the Arctic and to the Chukchi and to the Beaufort. And so it is something which Shell and the industry are trying to address. It's something which we will address before we allow drilling to continue. And then the third issue, which is just as critically as important, has to do with oil spill response. What happens when you have an oil spill in the way that we had in the Gulf of Mexico? We had oil spill response plans which BP had filed, which indicated that they had the capacity to respond to an oil spill and to do so effectively in an amount that was much higher actually than what came out of the Macondo well. And yet when all was said and done, you now have 1,200 miles of coastline in the Gulf of Mexico that have been impacted. You have natural resources that have been damaged. And so there is no question that the oil spill response plan which BP had was inadequate. And so one of the major questions that we're facing is what will we require of companies with respect to having an adequate oil spill response plan? And that third question is very applicable to the Arctic Circle area. You know, what happens if you have an oil spill in the Chukchi and the Beaufort? How is it going to be contained? So those are questions which are very much alive and which we have on the table now, and we'll be considering them as we make our decisions on how we move forward in the Arctic. Yes?
Can you tell us more about your meeting with ConocoPhillips? What was discussed?
You know, ConocoPhillips has a great interest in moving forward into the National Petroleum Reserve, the MPRA, by expanding their fields into what they call the CD5 area and satellites that they want to expand. There's a permit that has been denied, a Section 404 permit by the Army Corps of Engineers. We met with them as well as with the Alaskan Native communities to get their sense of what it was that can be done and might be done, try to mitigate some of the effects of the bridge to allow the development to move forward. So we will take a hard look to see how we might be able to do that. We don't have yet a definitive way forward, but it's an issue which we are interested in, and we will see whether there's a resolution here that we can arrive at.
A lot of critics have said that MMS has changed in name only. How do you respond to that criticism?
It's wrong and it's false. The fact is that we have reformed MMS in major ways, and that reform started since last year with the major efforts that we had to deal with issues relating to conflict of interest, where we prosecuted people and we fired people and we took other personnel actions and set forth the kinds of standards for conflicts of interest that are appropriate for employees who work with the government. We also move forward with major reform efforts to expand the agency's mission from just conventional oil and gas to embrace renewable energy. That was a major reform issue as well. And we move forward to try to enhance the budgets of MMS with additional inspectors. But it's clear that the Deepwater Horizon has taught the nation, the Congress, and everybody else that 3 decades of how we provide oversight with respect to the development of ocean energy needs to have a new voice. And that is what I, as Secretary, with David Hayes, as Deputy Secretary, and Michael Bromwich are working on. Our goal is to raise the standard on industry. Our goal is to develop the gold standard by which oil and gas companies develop oil and gas resources in the oceans of our nation. Yes.
I'm curious about whether or not anything about the Endangered Species Act came out and what your take is on the current tensions between, on the one hand, groups that are seeking
to list more species and more critical habitat, and on the other, the state, which is resisting quite sternly as much of that as possible.
You know, the ESA issues come up everywhere, and they obviously are huge here in Alaska, including issues relating to the listing of the polar bear. Our view is that we will have the science drive the decisions with respect to the listing of species, as well as with the removal of species. You know, whenever people ask me about the ESA issues, I say, you know, we need to look back also at the great successes that we have. You know, the children of this nation will know the ground pelican and the whooping crane and the grizzly bear and others, because of the fact that there have been protections for those species. Otherwise, those species would have gone into extinction. So we have many examples of successes. We also know that sometimes the ESA doesn't work as well as it should work. It gets caught up in the kind of bureaucracy that gets a lot of people mad. And so we're looking at ways of streamlining the ESA as well. Yes.
Sir, you mentioned CD5 and MPRA. Did I hear you to say you're going to take an active role in trying to mediate that?
On the MPRA?
Yeah, on the CD5 issue.
I want to see whether there is a way in which we can address the concerns that have been raised by EPA as well as by the Fish and Wildlife Service to try to move forward. I don't know whether we will be able to, but I think there is a history with respect to the MPRA that makes makes it worthwhile for me to spend some of my own personal time seeing whether I can bridge the differences in.
Do you think that?
Let me ask.
How would you characterize the state of research and science in the Chukchi and the Beaufort as far as having what you need to allow regulatory decisions to go forward?
You know, when we made the announcement on the future plans for the OCS, part of what we did is we canceled the 4 leases in the Chukchi and in the Beaufort Seas, and we also made the decision with the president that Bristol Bay needed to have protection, and that protection has been put on Bristol Bay, and leases were canceled there as well. With respect to the Arctic areas, our view was that there needed to be additional science that had to be put on the table, as well as dealing with some of these issues relating to oil spill response, and that's why we made the decisions that we made on the Chukchi and on the Beaufort Seas. So those are, the issue of science and the Arctic is a huge issue for us. As David and I flew around, spent some time up in the Beaufort, looking at the ice conditions up there. It's a very different kind of challenge to develop in the Arctic than it is to develop in the Gulf of Mexico or other places. And so we're acutely aware of those issues, and we want to be thoughtful and comprehensive as we move forward with these very important issues for the country and for the citizens of the state of Alaska, and for both the private sector interests that have huge investments in both the Chukchi and the Beaufort, as well as Alaska natives and others who have an interest in that happens. Who has not asked a question?
As a result of the Fish and Wildlife Service's updating of the ANWR management plan, do you have any indication at this point whether or not you would be inclined to recommend to the Congress wilderness designation for the 1002 area?
We need to develop additional information for me on that, and right now we have, I don't have that information in front of me. The Alaska National Wildlife Refuge is a very important area, and I know that the coastal plains and the 1002 area have also a specific legislative history that comes with it. And so we will work with the Fish and Wildlife Service and make some decisions as we move forward. We have at this point no specific plan. We come to you with that.
I just want to
It's not every
clarify.
day that I'm in Alaska, so Kendra will probably say you've already taken too many questions, but since I'm in Anchorage today, I gotta make sure I take all your questions.
I just wanted to clarify on the decision about the Chukchi and Beaufort.
would Shell reasonably know in time to plan their drilling what you're going to decide? And also, on top of that, sorry, piggyback the question on, does the latest explosion have any bearing on your overall moratorium decision and going forward here in Alaska, the latest explosion in the Gulf? First of all, will Shell be able to know in time for the drilling plan and the latest explosion? How does that affect any of your decisions?
Yeah, we are currently, on your first question on Shell and the timing of that, I don't know today, and I can't give you the answer to that. We are working on it, and I think so much of it will depend on what the outcome is of the Michael Bromwich report, which he will give to me on drilling safety and worker safety. Some of it will depend on the reports that we received from the Marine Board that's conducting the investigation on what happened on the Deepwater Horizon, which is now due the end of, I think it was probably the end of October. We also have the National Academy of Engineering that will be providing a report on what happened there as well. And so it's a dynamic situation, and we will make our decisions based on the information that comes forward. Secondly, let me say with respect to the moratorium itself, the way that we prepared the moratorium, it applies to the Gulf of Mexico. Because it's a moratorium that applies to the deep waters. Okay, and to recognize the issues with the Chukchi and the Beaufort, that it is not in the deep water, but because some of those same issues that we are dealing with, such as the adequacy of blowout preventers and the adequacy of oil spill response plans, are very much on my mind as Secretary of Interior. That is why we did not allow the exploration wells to be drilled this summer. Okay, so as those questions are answered, we'll then make the decision about what kind of direction we will give to Shell with respect to the leases, which Shell already has, and so that's something that we'll be working on in the weeks and months ahead.
And the latest explosion, is that?
Yeah, I think the latest explosion. I was on the phone for a good amount of time from Barrow, Alaska yesterday with Admiral Papps, as well as with the president and CEO of the Mariner Corporation, which owned the platforms. Industrial accidents happen, and it was obviously an industrial accident that happened there. And there's an investigation that is underway. Mike Bromwich and the OEM will be leading that investigation, and we'll find out exactly what happened. But at this point, it doesn't seem like there was any oil that was released out, so the oil pollution is not an issue, and it's not another Deepwater Horizon issue. It appears to be an industrial accident. Yes.
You've obviously made a clear statement that the Arctic is included in the drilling moratorium. Can you explain why this has been explicitly stated in the notice to lessees that have been published on this?
Ask your question again.
Yeah, as I understand it, the notice to lessees that have been published by DOI for the drilling moratorium do not explicitly mention the Arctic, but you've said that the moratorium is to apply to the Arctic. Could you explain the discrepancy?
Well, the moratorium on the Arctic essentially is imposed in a different way. That's because in order for Shell to move forward with the drilling of the exploration wells which they planned, they needed my authorization. I withheld that authorization because of the fact that some of the same questions that I am looking at in the Gulf of Mexico are central to the question of whether we allow an exploration well. And if you look at the Chukchi, nothing or very little is known about the reservoir pressures that will be encountered. When you look at the Chukchi, we know that it would be very difficult to mount the kind of oil spill response that has been mounted in the Gulf of Mexico. So those questions are very much part of what we have been dealing with. It also seemed necessary for us to say until we have answers to some of those central questions, we're not going to allow the drilling of the exploration wells. David, you want to comment on that as well?
I'd just like to clarify, because this can be confusing. The notice to lessees apply to anyone who is drilling offshore whether you're in shallow water or deep water. Now, separately, the Secretary entered a moratorium on deep water drilling. And the report the Secretary referred to is coming together on the deep water drilling. And then in another action, as to the Arctic, the Secretary said we're not going forward this year with drilling offshore in the Beaufort or Chukchi. Now that's shallow water. So there's essentially a moratorium at the current time on the Arctic as well. And what the Secretary is saying is these are linked, but formally the moratorium is for deep water.
Okay, but the statement about the Arctic drilling was specifically made to Shell. Is that what you're saying? It wasn't.
Yes,
a
it was.
statement,
What was on the plate for
Right.
the Secretary was the question of whether APDs would be granted for exploratory drilling this summer.
Okay.
The answer was no, not for this summer. We need to digest what has happened in the Gulf.
Last question.
Who has to answer the question?
Okay, I have a question. You talked about protection and studies and science. As you can see by that map here on the wall, the Department of the Interior has over 70% of land here in the state. And the state just finished the first phase of a 2-year program to do digital mapping. I'm wondering if the Department of the Interior is going to put any resources into digital mapping here in the state.
David, you want to take that one?
It's a subject of frequent discussion, but and I can't answer it specifically. I can tell you that the USGS is looking hard at our overall mapping capability. We know how important this is. We're making some long-term planning decisions along these lines, but don't have anything specific to tell you right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I would only say that, we've, as we're moving forward with fish on with all of our agencies and with our partners, the Fish and Wildlife Service, Sam Hamilton, who was our former director of Fish and Wildlife, had the idea that we would move forward with the formation of landscape conservation cooperatives. And so we are looking, for example, at the Arctic as one of the places where we will stand up one of the first landscape conservation cooperatives. Basically, that's an effort to try to tie in, tie together the landscapes and to understand the migratory patterns for wildlife and how habitats are all linked together. It is almost impossible to do those kinds of initiatives effectively unless you have the kind of mapping capability that needs to be developed. And so we've asked USGS, I've asked Director Marcia McNutt to actually look at how we can do this more effectively across the country. And there are states such as Alaska, states such as Maryland. Maryland has a program called Green Print, which allows the new capacities that we have through geospatial planning to get a better handle on some of these mapping issues. So it's an issue that's very important to you. I'm going to take one more quick question.
Oh, wonderful. Appreciate it, because it was something that hadn't come up. I followed the Owenga case, which is up in the North Slope, and it's a BIA-related matter, and I know that it's in kind of a up or down situation in federal court right now, and I believe that the federal government, Department of Interior through Bureau of Indian Affairs has been at, and the other parties have been asked to go back and start talking again. So I wondered if there's anything active going on there. It's kind of a interesting case in that it involves allotment, native allotment, and BP. So is there anything you can say about that?